There is a tiredness that has nothing to do with a lack of sleep. It's a weariness in the soul, a quiet exhaustion that comes from being a human shock absorber. For years, perhaps a lifetime, you have been the one who understands, the one who listens, the one who smooths over the cracks in other people's realities. You have absorbed their anger, their anxieties, their chaos, and called it love, called it loyalty, called it being a good person. And then, one day, something breaks. Or rather, something quietly clicks into place. It's not a loud, dramatic event. It's a moment of profound inner stillness. A provocative text message arrives, and for the first time, your thumbs don't move to type out a long, carefully worded explanation. A frantic phone call comes, and you simply look at the screen, your body refusing the familiar surge of adrenaline, the automatic impulse to answer and to soothe. You do nothing. You say nothing. You let the silence stand. And in that silence, two things happen at once. The first is a terrifying, unfamiliar wave of guilt, a voice screaming inside that you are being cruel, cold, selfish. The second is a tiny, fragile sense of peace. A space opens up in your mind where the frantic calculations used to be. For a single moment, you are not responsible for anyone's emotional weather but your own. This is the moment everything changes. This is the moment you stop reacting. And this is the moment the mask, which you may not have even consciously noticed, begins to tremble. Not just their mask, yours too. You have just withdrawn your energy from a dynamic that required it to survive, like pulling a key support beam from a carefully constructed stage set. And now, the entire production is beginning to shudder. What follows is often a period of intense confusion. The person you were so attuned to may suddenly escalate. Their behavior becomes erratic, unpredictable. They might accuse you of the very things they have done, calling you cold-hearted, manipulative, a monster. They might suddenly become incredibly loving, promising everything you ever wanted to hear. They might try to provoke you, to incite any reaction at all, because even a negative reaction is a connection. It is fuel. And as you watch this performance, this frantic dance to pull you back onto the stage, you see the cracks. You see the desperation behind the charm. You see the fear behind the rage. The carefully maintained image they presented to the world, and to you, begins to slip. The mask is falling. And it's falling because you are no longer holding it up for them. But this is only the surface of the story. The popular narrative tells you that you have cut off narcissistic supply, and that this is a power move to expose them. This is true in a way, but it is a shallow truth. It keeps your focus on them, on their mask, on their reaction. The deeper, more life-altering truth is not about what happens to them when you stop reacting. It is about what happens to you. From a Jungian perspective, this moment of withdrawal is not a tactic. It is a summons from the self. It is the beginning of one of the most crucial and difficult journeys of the human psyche, the process of individuation. You are not simply setting a boundary with another person. You are setting a boundary between your true self and the role you have been playing. The mask that is truly beginning to fall is your own, the persona of the eternally patient, endlessly giving, pathologically understanding empath. And what is emerging from behind it is the person you were always meant to be. To understand the depth of this shift, we have to look at the psychological structure that was in place. In Jungian terms, the role you played was a persona. The persona is the social mask we wear to navigate the world. For some, it's the persona of the successful professional, the rebellious artist, or the stoic leader. For the empath caught in a draining dynamic, the persona is that of the good person, the healer, or the rescuer. This persona is not inherently bad. It's a necessary tool. The problem arises when we over-identify with it, when being good is no longer something you do, but who you are. When your entire sense of self-worth is fused with your ability to soothe, fix, and be needed. This is when the persona becomes a gilded cage. You are praised for your kindness, your patience, your strength. But what you know, in the quiet, exhausted moments, is that this kindness has come at the cost of your own feelings. This patience has been a betrayal of your own needs. This strength is the strength of a dam holding back a flood of your own unexpressed pain, anger, and resentment. These unexpressed parts of you do not simply disappear. They are relegated to what Carl Jung called the shadow. The shadow contains all the aspects of ourselves that we deem unacceptable, and therefore repress into the unconscious. For the person identified with the good person persona, the shadow contains everything that contradicts it: healthy anger, the ability to say no, the desire for solitude, the right to put oneself first. It contains the parts of you that are not endlessly nice. This is the unconscious contract in a narcissistic or emotionally draining dynamic. You unconsciously agree to carry the persona of pure goodness and empathy. In return, the other person gets a space to project all of their own disowned chaos, neediness, and negativity. You become the container for their shadow, so they don't have to face it. The dynamic is perfectly, toxically symbiotic. They need your light to avoid their own darkness, and you, identified with your persona, need their neediness to feel valuable and good. When you stop reacting, you are breaking this contract. You are refusing to be the container anymore. You are, in essence, handing their shadow back to them. And a person whose ego is fragile, whose sense of self is built entirely on their own mask, cannot handle this. They have no internal structure to process their own feelings. Their reality was dependent on you mirroring back to them the image they wanted to see. You were the flawless mirror that only reflected their best angles. Now, by being silent, you have become a different kind of mirror, a real one. And what they see reflected in your quiet stillness is not the grandiose, charming, or victimized self they project, but the raw, unmanaged anxiety and emptiness that lies beneath their mask. They cannot bear this reflection, and so they must try to shatter the mirror. This is why the reaction is so often rage, blame, and projection. They accuse you of being the crazy one, the unstable one, the cruel one, because they are frantically trying to disown the very chaos they now see in themselves. This is a critical turning point. The temptation is to get drawn back in, to defend yourself, to explain your silence, to prove you are not the monster they are painting you to be. But if you react, you are picking the mask back up. You are reassuring them that the old dynamic is still in play. You are stepping back onto the stage. The moment you engage with the content of their accusations, you lose. Not because they are right, but because you have once again made it about them. The real work is to stay with the discomfort in your own body, to observe their frantic performance not as a commentary on your worth, but as data. It is a live report on the inner state of a person who has lost their primary source of emotional regulation. It has nothing to do with you as a person, and everything to do with the role you have just vacated. The guilt you feel is perhaps the most powerful chain that keeps you bound to this role. From a Jungian standpoint, this guilt is not a simple emotion. It is the cry of a dying complex. A complex is an emotionally charged cluster of ideas and images in the personal unconscious. The rescuer complex, or the good person complex, has been running your life. It has a voice, it has needs, and its primary need is to keep you in the role that gives it life. When you set a boundary, this complex is starved. It panics. It floods your system with guilt, which feels intensely personal and real. The guilt says, "You are a bad person. You are hurting them. A good person would not do this. You are abandoning them." This guilt feels like an objective moral truth, but it is not. It is the withdrawal symptom of an addiction to a role. It is the echo of your old persona, fighting for its survival. To heal is to learn to sit with this guilt without acting on it, to observe it as a phenomenon, a storm passing through your nervous system. To say to it, "I see you, I hear you, I understand you are scared, but I am no longer available for that job." This is an act of profound psychological courage. It is choosing the unknown reality of your own self over the familiar comfort of a toxic role. This is where the process of individuation truly begins. Carl Jung saw individuation as the central task of human life. It is the journey of becoming an individual, meaning, literally, undivided. It is the process of integrating the conscious and unconscious parts of ourselves to become a whole, unique, and authentic person. It is about differentiating ourselves from the collective, from our family roles, our social masks, and the expectations of others. For the empath who has lived in an enmeshed state, the act of not reacting is the first, decisive step toward differentiation. For your entire life, your emotional state may have been fused with another's. Their good mood was your good mood. Their crisis was your crisis. There was no clear line where you ended and they began. The boundary of silence creates that line. It is painful, like surgery without anesthesia. It carves out a space that is uniquely yours. In this space, for the first time, you are forced to encounter yourself. Without the distraction of their constant drama, who are you? Without the validation of being needed, what is your worth? Without the role of the rescuer, what is your purpose? These are terrifying questions, and the ego will do anything to avoid them. It will try to pull you back into obsessing about the other person. You will find your mind replaying conversations, analyzing their behavior, wondering what they are thinking, trying to predict their next move. This is a subtle form of still being in the dynamic. Your body may have left the stage, but your mind is still in the theater. Individuation requires you to consciously and repeatedly pull your psychic energy back, to turn the spotlight of your attention from them to you. When you feel the urge to check their social media, ask yourself, what feeling am I trying to avoid in myself right now? When you are composing a long text in your head, ask, what is it that I need to say to myself? This is the beginning of a true inner dialogue. You start to meet the parts of you that were exiled into the shadow, your anger, for instance. For years, you may have believed you were not an angry person, but now, in this new quiet space, you might feel flashes of rage. This is not a sign that you are becoming a bad person. It is your healthy, life-affirming anger finally being allowed a voice. It is the part of you that says, I have a right to exist, my needs matter, you will not cross this line. This anger is a sacred energy. It is the guardian of your new boundary. Learning to feel it without being consumed by it is a key part of integration. You also meet your own grief. The grief for the person you thought they were. The grief for the love you so desperately wanted to be real. The grief for the years you spent trying to fill a cup that had a hole in the bottom. And most profoundly, the grief for yourself, for the person who abandoned herself for so long. Allowing this grief to move through you without judgment is a cleansing process. It is how you wash away the residue of the old dynamic. As you do this work, something remarkable happens. The other person's behavior starts to lose its power over you. Their accusations, which once felt like daggers, now sound like the desperate noise of a machine running out of fuel. Their attempts at manipulation, which once were so confusing, now seem transparent and almost clumsy. You are no longer watching the play from the front row, emotionally invested in every line. You are watching it from the back of the theater, recognizing it as a script you simply no longer wish to perform. You begin to embody a new kind of quietness. It is not the frozen, fearful silence of before. It is a warm, grounded silence, a silence that is full of your own presence. They may call this silence cold, but your body knows it is peace. Your nervous system, which has been on high alert for years, finally begins to regulate. You start to sleep better. You find joy in small things again. The taste of your coffee, the sunlight on your skin, a song on the radio. You are re-inhabiting your own life. If this journey names something you have felt but never been able to put into words, take a moment to acknowledge that. This recognition itself is a powerful step out of the fog. The falling of their mask was never the point. It was just a signpost on the road. The true destination is the integration of your own being. It is the realization that your worth is not contingent on your usefulness to someone else. Your value is inherent. It exists whether you are soothing someone's ego or not. This is the deepest meaning of a boundary. It is not a wall to punish someone. It is the sacred circle you draw around yourself to allow your own soul to grow. It is the statement that says, I am here, I am a separate being, and I am worthy of my own care. As you become more solid in this new reality, you may find that the dynamic changes again. Sometimes the other person, deprived of their old source of regulation, will simply fade away in search of a new one. Their absence, which you once feared more than anything, becomes a quiet blessing. In other cases, they may try to re-engage, but they will be met with a different person. They will not be met by the anxious, accommodating rescuer, but by a calm, centered individual who is no longer available for the old dance. You may be polite, you may even be kind, but you will not be a doormat. Your energy will no longer have the hooks for their projections to latch onto. They will feel this shift on an energetic level, and they will realize the stage set is gone for good. There is nothing for them here anymore. The ultimate goal of this process is not to become hard or unfeeling. It is the opposite. It is to become so rooted in your own self that you can engage with the world from a place of genuine strength and choice, not from a place of compulsive need and obligation. Your empathy becomes a gift you can choose to give, not a resource that is constantly being drained. You learn to offer compassion without sacrificing yourself. This is the promise of individuation. It is a long and often lonely road. It requires you to be the one sane person in a crazy-making dynamic. It requires you to trust your own perception when someone is actively trying to gaslight you. It requires you to endure the discomfort of guilt and the fear of the unknown. But on the other side of that journey is a wholeness that is unshakable. It is the peace of knowing that you have finally come home to yourself. You have taken off the mask of the good person and discovered the far more beautiful and complex reality of the whole person you are. You have integrated your shadow, reclaimed your power, and drawn the sacred circle of your own being. When you stopped reacting, you did not start a war. You started a revolution, an inner revolution. The falling mask of the other was just the first, distant sound of a fortress crumbling. The true liberation was the quiet click of the lock turning in the door of your own cage, and your slow, steady, determined walk into the light of your own authentic life. My kindness no longer requires my self-betrayal. This statement, my kindness no longer requires my self-betrayal, is not an endpoint. It is a seed. It is the core principle of a new internal constitution you are just beginning to write. At first, it is a thought, a fragile mantra you repeat to yourself in moments of doubt. But the real transformation happens when this principle moves from the mind down into the very tissues of your body. For years, your body has been a silent partner in your self-abandonment. It has been the physical ledger where the costs of your persona were recorded. Think of the chronic tension in your shoulders, a physical bracing for the next emotional blow. Think of the shallow breathing, a subconscious attempt to feel less, to keep the overwhelming emotions at bay. Think of the knot in your stomach, the physical manifestation of anxiety and unprocessed fear. Your body has been in a state of prolonged, low-grade siege, fighting a war on someone else's behalf. When you withdraw your reaction and hold the line of your new boundary, the body begins a slow and sometimes confusing process of demobilization. This is the body memory layer of healing. You may suddenly feel waves of exhaustion that make no sense. This is your nervous system finally coming out of a years-long fight-or-flight state. It's the exhaustion of a soldier finally allowed to rest after the war is over. You may experience strange aches, twitches, or pains in places you've held tension for a decade. This is not a sign of sickness. It is the feeling of frozen energy beginning to thaw and move. It is the body unwinding itself from the contortions of the role it was forced to play. You might find yourself taking a deep, shuddering breath out of nowhere. This is your diaphragm, long clenched, finally releasing. It is your body's way of saying, it is safe to be here now. It is safe to take up space. This somatic release is not something you can force through intellectual understanding alone. It happens in the quiet spaces you create by not reacting. By staying in your own center, you give your body the permission it has been waiting for, permission to let go. As your body begins to trust this new safety, you will notice other concrete inner signs of integration. Your inner world, once a noisy chamber of self-criticism and anxious planning, starts to change its acoustics. The voice of the inner critic, which so often sounded suspiciously like the person you were entangled with, begins to lose its volume. It's not that it vanishes overnight, but its accusations lose their sting. You begin to develop an observer self, a compassionate witness that can hear the critic and say, "Thank you for your concern, but that is an old story. We are not doing that anymore." This new inner voice is the emerging voice of the self, and it is curious, calm, and unconditionally on your side. Another profound sign is the purification of your emotions. In the enmeshed dynamic, your feelings were a tangled mess. Love was laced with fear, loyalty was steeped in guilt, and a moment of peace was immediately followed by anxiety about when it would be shattered. Now, as you inhabit your own sovereign space, your emotions become clearer. You can feel anger, and it is a clean, bright fire that signals a boundary has been crossed, without the confusing undertone of guilt for feeling it. You can feel sadness, a pure grief for what was lost, without the shame that you should be over it. Your emotions become what they were always meant to be, pure information, signals from your soul guiding you toward what is true and life-affirming. Perhaps the most joyful sign is the return of spontaneity. Hypervigilance kills playfulness. For years, you were scanning the horizon for the next emotional storm. Now, with the skies clearing, you may find yourself laughing from your belly at something silly. You might feel a sudden urge to listen to music you loved as a teenager, to paint, to dance in your kitchen, or to simply lie in the grass and watch the clouds. This is your life force, your psychic energy, or libido, as Jung termed it, returning to you. It is no longer being siphoned off to regulate another person's inner chaos. It is now available for your own life, for your own creativity, for your own joy. This is the deeper work of integrating your shadow. The persona of the good person forced you to disown any trait that didn't fit that perfect, accommodating image. Your anger, your assertiveness, your desire for solitude, your right to be, quote, selfish, were all cast into the darkness of the unconscious. The journey of individuation is the quest to go into that darkness and retrieve these exiled parts, for they contain your power. You begin to realize that your shadow is not a monster to be slain, but a treasure to be reclaimed. The, quote, selfishness you were taught to fear is, in its healthy form, the sacred act of self-care. It is the wisdom to put on your own oxygen mask first. The anger you suppressed is not destructive rage. It is the pure energy of life itself, the guardian of your integrity, the force that says, "I matter." As you befriend these aspects, you become a different kind of person. You are no longer just nice, a passive state that can easily be exploited. You become truly kind, which is an active and conscious choice. And because you have integrated your shadow, your kindness now has a backbone of steel. You can be compassionate and firm in the same breath. You can offer help from a place of genuine abundance, and you can also say no with a quiet, unshakable peace. You are no longer a two-dimensional character. You are becoming whole. But the journey is not a simple, linear ascent. There will be tests. Often, the most significant test comes much later, long after the storm has passed and you feel stable and integrated in your new self. This is the late practical test, the universe's final exam. It may arrive as a new person entering your life, charming, intense, and with a story that tugs at your old rescuer strings. Or it may be the original person re-emerging, perhaps after a long silence, with a new, more sophisticated approach. They may present themselves as changed, humbled, full of apologies. They may create a crisis that seems designed to pull only you back in. The initial feeling might be a shock to your system. A ghost of the old pattern flickers. You might feel a pang of guilt, a twinge of responsibility, a faint echo of the old desire to soothe and to fix. Your body may even have a momentary memory of the old anxiety. This is the critical moment. The old you would have been hooked by this feeling, interpreting it as a sign to engage. But the integrated you does something different. You feel the flicker, but you do not become it. You observe it from your grounded center. You recognize it for what it is, a neurological echo, a memory trace. You can look at the bait and for the first time feel no hunger for it. Passing the test is not about feeling nothing. It is about your response to what you feel. The victory is the quiet space between the stimulus and your reaction. In that space, you make a conscious choice from your new, whole self. It might be a calm, polite refusal. It might be a simple, non-reactive, "I wish you well." Most often, it is the profound power of continued silence. Not a fearful, avoidant silence, but a peaceful, decisive silence that says, "I see you. I understand the game, and I am no longer playing." When you pass this test, a final, deep layer of healing clicks into place. It's a quiet, internal knowing, the realization that you are truly free. The pattern is not just managed, it is dissolved. This path, from the first moment of non-reaction to this final click of freedom, is the essence of individuation. It was never about them. Their falling mask was just the overture, the dramatic event that forced you to turn your gaze away from the stage and into your own inner audience. The real drama, the real story of transformation, was happening within you. So, if you are in the midst of this, in the terrifying silence, in the storm of guilt, in the confusion of your body's release, know this: you are on a sacred path. You are not being cruel, you are becoming honest. You are not being selfish, you are becoming self-full. You are not falling apart, you are falling back together, into the whole and authentic person you were always meant to be. The empathy that once felt like a curse is being reforged into a superpower, one that you now wield with wisdom, discernment, and a deep, abiding love for the person who matters most in your story, yourself. The world doesn't need more exhausted martyrs. It needs wholehearted, grounded empaths, shining their light not as a beacon for sinking ships, but as a steady lamp upon their own path, illuminating the way for others by the simple, powerful act of being authentically themselves.